You have no understanding of the reality of classrooms.
And another login, another interaction to save time. It's just another time hoover.
And my worry is too many people at the minute are just trying to do the tick the box.
We're language models interacting with large language models.
I just gave up. Can't take all the protein off my plate, still need the protein, you know? I like that version.
I'm delighted that you came back to me. I saw that clip on LinkedIn, the clip from the Education Select Committee. When we post this out, I will put the link to that for anybody that hasn't seen it. I really appreciated the way that you were able to speak on such a complex subject with such a colloquial sort of simplicity that I really understood and thought that more people should see that video and the way that you spoke about it. I hope that you think that's fair. Former software engineer, former maths and physics teacher with 10 plus years classroom experience, that you founded and led Teach Development Trust, which is a national charity focused on improving professional development for teachers and school leaders. You've also chaired the DFE's Teacher Professional Development Expert Group, co-authored Unleashing Great Teaching, and that now you lead EdTech and maths teacher projects at Purposeful Ventures, that you co-led the Maths Horizon review of England's maths curriculum and assessment system, and is now researching how AI and EdTech are being used in maths education. Your recent report drew on more than 100 interviews with teachers, maths specialists, researchers, technologists, and policymakers. Before you became a maths and a physics teacher, you studied engineering and computer science, and you worked as a software developer. How did your systems thinking background shape the way that you taught? And what did the classroom teach you that technology couldn't?
Oh, interesting. Maybe the way to answer that is to say what I wanted it to teach me, but I struggled with. Because I think a lot of the work I'd been doing was understanding, what's the research on an area, and then you work things through logically and you model things and you figure out the best solutions. And both through engineering and software engineering, that's just the way you go and do these things. Everything is relatively logical. And in the classroom, I didn't find that. And there were not so many rules. And it felt like a lot of the theory was very distant from what I was doing. And I think that left me with a slight sense of dissatisfaction, as like, I can't quite figure out the lever to pull to do quite what I want, and probably led to me being particularly excited when it got to sort of 2010, when I discovered the evidence movement, and actually that there was loads of research and kind of mechanisms and things out there that actually had been known for a long time that I had never learned about. It felt very satisfying as someone who'd been looking for some of these linkages and hadn't found them. And it felt quite exciting that actually there were things I felt I could have a little more agency and intellectually understand a little more how to help. Whereas previously, perhaps it had felt more like guesswork. But I guess what I had learned from being a teacher was the relational side and really trying to build the trust, or sadly sometimes lose it with a student. And actually bringing those two pieces together probably stood me in very good stead for the future, I think.
Really interesting. I think of a slight similarity with me. I couldn't understand how there was no list for us to teach from when I'd asked my first head of English, I know I've got to deliver Macbeth, I've got to deliver Christmas Carol, I've got to work my way through all of these exam texts, but where's the list of the skills that don't change for us to work through? And he said, well, there isn't one. And I couldn't believe that these skills that never change weren't available to learners, weren't available to teachers, to parents, to anybody else. And I think that bridging sometimes of the personable and the passionate in the classroom and the relationship building, and then sometimes that lack of absolute clarity and system and process that can help to guide the whole thing along, the household and the parents, the learners and the school in that ultimate triangulation.
when you were in the classroom, for a long time, people have talked about the power and promise of EdTech. But what comes to mind is a piece of EdTech that everybody was certain would change everything and didn't?
Oh, great question. Voting pads, remember those? The,
Yeah.
the mice voting pads in the flight case that would be in the head of department's cupboard so that the teacher could create the multiple choice quizzes on the front and you would have a voting mouse with 9 buttons on. I think the main problem with that, unfortunately, is, as is so often the case, was a hardware ed tech issue. And I think as an infrastructure, that is where sometimes the software fundamentally struggles, which people don't really think about. I think unless you've taught in a school, you don't really understand how poor some of the hardware and infrastructure is that schools rely on a day-to-day
Yeah,
basis. You know,
that's right. And also the fact that you're in such a high intensity situation where something that goes wrong not only knocks your confidence, but takes away minutes of time from students.
yeah,
But you don't want to be in a position where you're thinking, I actually don't know how to fix this now. So you don't want to use anything that's unreliable where you don't feel super confident. Me, with my engineering and software background, I many occasions used to abandon the interactive whiteboard because it would just take far too long to start up. It would be far too unreliable, too slow. I remember one classroom had this tiny little strip of whiteboard next to the interactive whiteboard, and I ended up writing nearly the whole lesson on that because 7 or 8 minutes to wait for the interactive whiteboard to boot up from the computer that was really slow to the network connection that wasn't very good. I just gave up. And that's funny because I love technology, but actually, as a teacher, you just need the thing that's just going to work.
I think that's completely true. If you're a teacher who changes classrooms, which is very common, and you go into a new classroom and you have to log in and you have to wait for that desktop to settle for you to then open that browser and put that piece of technology in and then log into that, you have no idea how long that takes on standard school infrastructure.
That's right.
And
That's right. And the fact that you have to be overseeing that while actually you should be at the door greeting children as they come in and you should be
100%.
organizing things. What is the gap right now between what EdTech promises at the BETT show and what teachers experience on a Tuesday morning period for?
I think there's quite a good bridge here. Designing education technology, in the absence of in the field teachers, and very often just banding around the phrase, by teachers for teachers, because you've commissioned somebody to come in and speak with them for 10 minutes and ask them if you can put them on the website. There's a fundamental disconnect between stating that you are doing something from a teacher's point of view and really engineering your software solution with the realities of a day-to-day classroom in mind. Even something as simple as considering the way that your, say, a web app, how it would cache, and having different options based on internet speed. So that if you were speaking to a school's IT team and saying that your English department would like to do they'd like to do a trial of our ed tech, do you mind just going into the classroom and on the English corridor, just getting an average download speed for us? I don't think these are questions that are being asked. At the very front end, people are building and making things more exciting and more bells and more whistles. The reality of teaching in state education, and my experience in state secondary education, is that you are using an infrastructure of technology and hardware that is often fundamentally unfit for purpose for the running of 2026 software. And if you're not considering that from the outset, then you're icing cakes that aren't baked properly.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
You now lead EdTech work at Purposeful Ventures, but you've also argued that technology should strengthen teachers rather than rooting around them. In the middle of all of the excitement around AI, what do you think EdTech companies should be building instead to make sure that they are building with the teachers So I suppose this adds on to my point around infrastructure and hardware, but this time around the teachers and the pedagogy. What's the mistake that tech companies are making when they're building for schools, and perhaps in the lacking of consideration for the teacher as the professional in the classroom?
I think to do this well requires quite a deep understanding of what's happening, not just in a regular classroom, but in a classroom where things are working well. As you say, you're a tech company and a teacher comes in. On a brief conversation, they might say, oh, I spend ages creating lesson plans, or I spend ages marking work. So you might immediately think, great, I'll just take that away from you. But unless you recognize that teacher expertise and the way that it's then enacted in the classroom and the way that we use the preparation time to think about what we're going to do,
Yeah,
unless you realize those things are linked together, you'll be jumping to the wrong solution.
yeah,
And in many cases, what we don't need teachers to do is actually cognitively offload, to use the fashionable term, but sort of get a computer to do loads of the thinking for them. What they want to do is get rid of some of the kind of the drudge work, which is not actual thinking, is getting in the way of the thing that is really helping them.
yeah,
So if you're doing work on assessment, I don't necessarily need to do exactly the same manual process with every single book or essay in front of me. I do need to really rapidly figure out what are the insights. And what I can't do is get those insights in a way that they just flash up on the screen and I go, oh, yeah, that sort of makes sense, but it doesn't leave a mark in my thinking. I need to have the insights and be able to think alongside them and with them. And then that's a useful process. So it's not, I can take over this boring thing for you. And it's not, I'll just give you the answer. It's, I can help you get to the level of expert thinking you need to get to more quickly with less drudgery and get to the part you really like. And that's the difference between having really lived the process, I think, and knowing what teachers really need to get to versus let me just tick a box for you. And my worry is too many people at the minute are just trying to do the tick the box and say, let me just take that off your plate. And that's a really important thing. Can't take all the protein off my plate, still need the protein, you know?
I completely agree. I think if it's from the outset is designed as a tool or as an indefatigable assistant to enable you to, you said about being more efficient, but also in some circumstances, enabling you to have an improved quality of life. Because if you're allowed to keep all your energy for your expertise, your relationships, your personable, passionate human expert in the room, is it that important for you to go through and identify every single missing apostrophe? Is it that important for you to go through and identify and correct every single spelling mistake? That level of identification and amendment, I think, at a really granular and repetitive level, which I was used to in from English assessment and English feedback, I can really see how AI can take some of that labor away from you. When we talk about AI adoption for teachers, there's a difference between AI adoption for a teacher who's been in the field for 20 years and a teacher who's going into teaching. What if we could just round off a few of these edges for you so that you could use the energy that you've got to just do this? That's very different to a 22-year-old going, you don't need to plan that. This will do it for you. So I think there's a wider conversation there around almost graduating into AI adoption for teaching, almost like going through processes first and graduating into it.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And then the other point I'd reflect on that you just said, which is really interesting, is can we give quality of life back with technology? And what's really interesting is the number of relatively anecdotal studies coming out at the minute of people who are using, say, agentic AI at work, who are reporting taking on far more projects, working far more at the weekend and the evenings and in spare times and multitasking. And while they're going to the shops, they're just like, oh, let me just open Claude or ChatGPT and ask the agent to do X, Y, and Z, and actually becoming more frazzled. And actually, there is a history of tech doing that where
Email.
we by absolutely loads of domestic machinery allowed us to not have to work full time to keep a house clean and clothes clean. But now we're expected to do those things with machines and then do loads of other stuff as well. So I think it is maybe overly optimistic to hope that it gives quality of life back. And you can easily see school leaders saying, oh, well, now that you can spend less time on marking, I'd like you to do more one-to-ones. I'd like you to run more clubs. I want to increase your teaching load. You can easily see that happening.
You can. Oh, that's a very good point, because it would be a one-for-one, isn't it? How much time do you think we've saved? 2 or 3 hours, right? Well, let's look at what we can do to fill those 2 or 3
That's right.
hours. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. You've defined 51 literacy skills that children need. So in a world where these students graduate and regularly use AI, which one or ones of the 51 do you think go up in value? And do you think any go down in value and importance?
Yeah, interesting question. So when people talk about AI literacy, at its core is fundamental and foundational traditional literacy across reading, writing, speaking, and listening. If you break down an LLM as a large language model and a human's interaction with it, we're LMs, we're language models interacting with large language models. We're finite into one explanation or the other based on the current width and breadth of the internet. The LLM is infinite. The quality of the input and the quality of the output on AI and generative AI are directly correlated. The quality of the input being what's spoken and what's written, and then the quality of the output being what's read and what's listened to. The best writers and the best speakers are going to receive the best reading materials and the best audio to listen to, because fundamentally, as a language model, what you put in is what you receive. So at the very, very core of all of the conversations around AI literacy is literacy. Traditional, hundreds and hundreds of years old staples of what does a good writer do? What does a good reader do? What does a good speaker do? And what does a good listener do? We know this from prompt engineering. It's the absolute strapline of what makes prompt engineering. And it is your ability to accurately, aptly, efficiently, not even thinking about token use or cost. How do you accurately and precisely instruct this model to do exactly what you want to do? That's an input of what you say.
That's so interesting.
What you say or what you write is that input. And what you do with the output in your critical thinking of that output is your reading and listening.
There's a really interesting study that actually I think backs up everything you're just saying from Anthropic, where they looked at the quality of large language model usage by lots of different people when they were doing coding tasks. And they found actually how good you are at coding turned out to be less important than how deeply you understand and can talk about and describe the domain that you're coding about, like medicine or engineering or business. And the more you understand that and can be really articulate about what you want there, that turned out to be more important than how good you were at coding. So that backs up your point.
That's life in a nutshell. Your ability to express yourself, your wants, your needs, desires, your confidence and your competence to do that through fundamental reading, writing, speaking, and listening only really comes after your health and your safety. You know, that's for human beings, that's third in line. So I don't see traditional literacy being anything other than pushed forward because of AI literacy, which I kind of use in inverted commas, that for the divide that will come in the future, I believe that the most proficient and confident, competent readers, writers, speakers, and listeners will be the ones that can utilize, harness, and benefit from AI the most.
Yeah, brilliant. Love that. Love that.
You've spent much of your career looking at what helps teachers to develop and to succeed. If a school gets both its professional development and its AI strategy right, how should the daily life of a classroom teacher be better 3 years from now?
I think it comes back to the two questions we had before. What the AI, I think, is if it works well, can allow much more rapid insight into what is happening in the classroom, in how do I assemble all of the best possible knowledge to adapt both in the moment and in my planning to help the children next. It's very difficult to constantly take into account not only every additional need in the classroom, but all of the latest evidence on those additional needs and fold that in. The ability to kind of bring some of those insights together will be higher, although there will always be the risk that you're then doing things you don't really know why you're doing them. But I think teachers have always had to wrestle with that sometimes with sort of pre-prepared lesson plans and such. So I think the ability to generate insights, get past some busy work, I think will be better. My fear is, in a world where every public service is fighting for money, if it is seen that, oh, well, there was a chance teachers might all be working an hour less, there will be a temptation from school leaders and government to say, well, let's just have slightly fewer teachers and they now need to do more with that technology. So even though they can do some things more efficiently than they used to 10 to 20 years ago, hopefully thinking harder and better rather than just having that circumnavigated. My worry is that actually it just makes teachers even busier and there's even more risk of burnout. But I do think there is another piece that teachers can feel more confident that more children can access things, whether there are sensory issues, we'll be able to use better technology, I think, to help children deal with visual impairments, auditory impairments, various other things that I think technology will more ubiquitously be able to help with. And also, because we can never do all the one-to-one that we want to try and help all the children, I also think that there will be some pieces that say, do you know what? There's this particular piece I would love you to have extra practice on, adaptive practice, and there will be some tools you can go away and just kind of strengthen those muscles. So actually, by the time you come back and we're all learning together, you feel you're more kind of with us and you're more supported, or you can get the extra stretch that you needed. So I'm hoping some of the adaptive work could be really helpful. I'm just hoping it doesn't come at the expense of everyone just getting more busy and more frazzled.
Yeah, and there certainly seems to be the history of that, as you touched on before, that everything that's designed to save time, because it's another way and another login, another interaction to save time, is just another time hoover. David, it's been absolutely brilliant chatting with you. Really glad.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Saw
Really
that
enjoyed it.
saw
Great.
that
And
video.